Pain has a way of making us small. It presses in on us, settles into the spaces between our ribs, and whispers that we should stay quiet, that no one will understand. That saying it out loud will only make it worse. So we push it down. We bury it beneath busyness, distractions, and forced smiles. We tell ourselves that if we ignore it long enough, it will go away. But it doesn't. It lingers, tightening its grip, turning into something heavier, something sharper. The truth is, pain thrives in silence. The more we refuse to name it, the more power it has over us. It becomes a shadow we can't escape, a weight we carry without even realizing it. It seeps into our relationships, our decisions, the way we see ourselves. It convinces us that we are alone, that we are somehow broken in a way that others aren't. And yet, the moment we name it, the moment we say, I am hurting, I feel lost, I don't know how to move forward, something shifts. Naming our pain doesn't mean we suddenly have all the answers. It doesn't mean that things get easier overnight, but it does mean that we are no longer letting it fester in the dark. Because pain, when left unnamed, grows. It turns into resentment, shame, fear. It keeps us stuck. But when we speak it, when we acknowledge it, we take the first step toward loosening its grip. There is a reason why we resist this so much. To name our pain means to admit that it exists. It forces us to face the thing we've been avoiding, to step into the discomfort instead of running from it. And that's terrifying. We worry that if we start talking about it, it will consume us, that we won't be able to handle the weight of it, that others will see us differently. But pain doesn't become bigger when we name it. It becomes more manageable. It stops being this looming, undefined force and becomes something we can work with, something we can eventually heal from. Think about grief. It is one of the most universal human experiences, yet so many of us try to pretend it doesn't exist. We tell ourselves to move on, to be strong, to focus on the good. But grief, when unspoken, doesn't fade. It turns into something heavier, something that builds up until one day it spills out in ways we don't expect. In anger, in exhaustion, in a deep and unshakable loneliness. But when we name it, when we say, I am grieving, and it hurts, we allow ourselves to feel, to process, to begin the slow work of healing. The same is true for every kind of pain. Heartbreak, disappointment, insecurity, fear. We carry these things like secrets, convinced that if we admit them, we will be judged or seen as weak. But the reality is that our silence isolates us far more than our honesty ever could. When we speak our pain, we create space for connection. We allow others to show up for us. We remind ourselves that we are not the only ones struggling. And that kind of honesty, it is the foundation of healing. There is also something incredibly powerful about hearing our own truth spoken aloud, about saying, I am struggling, and realizing that the world does not fall apart because of it, that the people who love us don't turn away, that we are still standing. We often underestimate how much simply acknowledging our pain can change things, not because it fixes everything immediately, but because it shifts the way we carry it. It gives us permission to stop pretending, to stop fighting so hard to keep everything bottled up inside. Naming our pain is not weakness. It is the bravest thing we can do. It is choosing to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. It is refusing to let shame keep us silent. It is recognizing that we cannot heal what we will not face. And while speaking our pain does not make it disappear, it does something just as important. It makes us visible. It reminds us that we are not alone. And in a world that tells us to keep it all together, choosing to name our pain is an act of courage. There is a moment in pain when the loneliness feels unbearable. It doesn't matter if you're surrounded by people, if you have friends who care, if you have a support system. When pain settles in, it has a way of making you believe that you are the only one feeling this way, that no one else understands, that no one else has ever carried this particular weight. And that belief, it isolates. It convinces you that you have to figure it out on your own, that reaching out would be pointless, that no one could possibly hold space for what you are going through. But the truth is, no matter how deep the hurt, no matter how personal the struggle, no matter how lost you feel, you are not the first person to walk this road. You are not the only one who has struggled to get out of bed in the morning. You are not the only one who has felt like an outsider. like you don't belong, like your voice doesn't matter. You are not the only one who has felt like you were breaking under the weight of it all. Someone somewhere has sat in the same kind of pain you are feeling right now. And maybe that doesn't fix everything. Maybe that doesn't make the ache disappear, but it means something. It means that pain does not make you an exception. It makes you human. The problem is when we are hurting, we build walls instead of bridges. We convince ourselves that no one will understand, that no one wants to hear about our struggles, that people will get tired of us if we're not always okay. So we stay quiet. We smile when we need to cry. We say we're fine when we're anything but. And every time we do, the distance grows. We become strangers to the very people who would hold us if we let them. We make ourselves small, convinced that our pain is too much, but it isn't. You are not too much. What you're feeling is not something to be ashamed of. There is a kind of magic that happens when someone looks you in the eyes and says, "Me too." Those words have the power to break through the silence, to remind you that you are not carrying this alone. And yet, we are so hesitant to reach for that connection. We are so afraid of being seen in our mess, so afraid of being judged, so afraid that if we reveal our deepest struggles, we will be met with rejection instead of understanding. But when we take the risk, when we choose to say, "This is hard for me, I'm struggling, I need help," more often than not, we are met with something unexpected, relief. Because we are not the only ones who need that connection. We are not the only ones who are tired of pretending. Loneliness is not just about being alone. It is about feeling unseen, unheard, misunderstood. And the only way to break that cycle is to let ourselves be known, to tell the truth about what we are going through, to give others the chance to show up for us. Because people can't read our minds. They can't always see past the brave face we put on. They don't always know when we're drowning unless we say something. There's a kind of belonging that exists beyond perfection, a kind of love that does not require you to be okay all the time. The people who truly care about you, they don't need you to be strong. They don't need you to have it all figured out. They just need you to let them in. And yes, there will be moments when you feel alone. There will be moments when the pain convinces you that no one understands. But feelings are not facts. The truth is, there are people who have been where you are and made it through. The truth is, you don't have to do this alone. There's an idea we have been taught from the moment we became aware of our own flaws, that we are projects, unfinished and broken, in need of repair. That if we could just work harder, be better, do more, we would finally be enough. It's in the way we talk about self-improvement, in the way we chase after perfection, in the way we measure our worth by our productivity, our achievements, the approval of others. It's in the way we look at our struggles as proof that something is wrong with us, rather than as proof that we are human. The belief that we must always be fixing ourselves keeps us in a cycle of self-judgment. Every mistake, every failure, every moment of doubt becomes another reason to tear ourselves apart. We tell ourselves that if we were smarter, stronger, more disciplined, we wouldn't be feeling this way. We believe that happiness is something we have to earn, that love is something we have to be worthy of, that healing is a destination we will reach once we have finally done enough. But the truth is, there is no version of you that is more deserving of love and kindness than the version of you that exists right now. Healing is not about erasing your pain. Growth is not about becoming a different person. And self-love is not something you win like a prize at the end of a long, exhausting race. You do not have to fix yourself because you were never broken to begin with. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a person to be understood, to be supported, to be cared for. The moments when you feel lost or uncertain or afraid do not mean you are failing. They mean you are alive. They mean you're learning. They mean you're growing in ways that cannot always be measured or seen. We live in a world that glorifies transformation, that tells us we should always be striving for some shinier, more polished version of ourselves. But what if the goal is not to become someone else? What if the goal is to come home to yourself, to stand in the mess and the uncertainty and say, "Z, this is me and I am enough"? There is a difference between growth and self-punishment. Growth is rooted in love. It is the desire to expand, to evolve, to step more fully into who you are meant to be. Self-punishment is rooted in shame. It is the belief that you must prove yourself, that you are only as good as your latest success, that you are not worthy as you are. And so many of us confuse the two. We think we are working on ourselves when really we are just tearing ourselves down. We think we are striving for a better life when really we are just running from the parts of ourselves we have been told are unlovable. When you believe you are broken, you will spend your entire life searching for the missing pieces. You will wait for the next achievement, the next relationship, the next milestone to make you feel whole. But you are not missing anything. You are not lacking. You are already everything you need to be, even if you can't see it yet. The work is not to fix yourself. The work is to stop believing that you were ever broken. The work is to meet yourself with the same kindness you offer to others, to give yourself permission to exist exactly as you are, without apology, without explanation. The work is to let go of the idea that you are only worthy once you have it all together, and to understand that your worth has never been in question. There is a story running through your mind right now, one that you may not even realize is there. It's the quiet voice that speaks when no one else is around. It's the narrative that tells you who you are, what you are capable of, and what you deserve. Sometimes that story is kind, reminding you that you are strong, that you have made it through hard things before, that you are still becoming. But more often, that story is heavy. It is woven from past wounds, old fears, and the echoes of things you were told long before you had the ability to question them. It tells you that you are not enough, that you will never truly heal, that you are somehow flawed in a way that others are not. The stories we tell ourselves shape the way we move through the world. They dictate how we see our pain, how we approach healing, and whether or not we believe we are even worthy of it. When we carry stories of shame, we learn to shrink ourselves, to apologize for our existence, to believe that love and belonging are things we must earn. When we carry stories of unworthiness, we sabotage ourselves before we even begin, convinced that we are destined to fail. When we carry stories of helplessness, we remain stuck, believing that no matter what we do, nothing will ever change. And so without realizing it, we live our lives according to a script we never meant to write. But here's the truth. The stories you tell yourself are not always the truth. They are often just reflections of old pain shaped by experiences that were never meant to define you. Maybe someone once made you feel small, and now you believe that your voice does not matter. Maybe you were abandoned, and now you tell yourself that you are unlovable. Maybe you failed once, and now you believe that you will always fail. These stories are not reality, they are interpretations. They are the brain's attempt to make sense of pain, to create order out of chaos. But just because the story feels real does not mean it is true. Healing is not just about mending the wounds of the past. It is about rewriting the stories that keep those wounds open. It is about questioning the voice in your head that tells you that you are broken beyond repair. It is about choosing again and again to tell yourself a different story, one that allows for growth, for grace, for the possibility of something more. This does not mean ignoring your pain or pretending that the past did not happen. It means refusing to let it define the rest of your life. It means stepping back and asking yourself, what if the things I have believed about myself are not true? What if I am stronger than I think? What if healing is possible for me, even when it feels out of reach? The way you talk to yourself matters. The words you use, the labels you cling to, the thoughts you repeat, all of these things create the lens through which you see yourself. If you tell yourself that you will never heal, you will resist healing. If you tell yourself that you are too damaged, you will find ways to prove that belief right. But if you tell yourself that you are capable of healing, even when it feels impossible, you open the door for something new. If you tell yourself that you are worthy of love and belonging, even when you don't fully believe it yet, you begin to move toward it. The mind searches for evidence of what it already believes, so the story you choose to tell yourself will shape the reality you live. Changing the narrative is not easy. It takes time. It takes intention. It takes recognizing when you are repeating an old story and having the courage to challenge it. It takes learning to replace self-criticism with self-compassion, to offer yourself the same kindness you would give to someone you love. It takes reminding yourself over and over that you are not the things that have happened to you. You are not the mistakes you have made. You are not the sum of your worst days. You are something deeper, something more. And no matter what your past has told you, you have the power to tell yourself a new story. There is a part of you that has been taught to hide, a part that has been told to be smaller, quieter, less affected by the world. Maybe you learned early on that being open meant being hurt. Maybe you were made to believe that strength was about endurance, about pushing through without ever letting anyone see the struggle. Maybe you convinced yourself that the safest way to exist was to keep your guard up, to never let anyone too close, to be independent to the point of isolation. But the truth is, the very thing you have been to protect the part of you that feels deeply, that longs for connection, that experiences the full weight of life, is not your weakness. It is your superpower. Vulnerability is not about weakness. It is not about oversharing or making yourself small in the hope that someone will save you. It is about showing up as you are without pretense, without the need to prove yourself. It is about saying, this is me and all of my uncertainty, all of my imperfections, all of my fears, and I'm still here, still worthy, still enough. That kind of openness is terrifying because it requires us to let go of the masks we wear, the ones that convince the world that we are fine even when we are breaking inside. But it is also the only way to truly be seen, to be known, to be loved for who we really are rather than for who we pretend to be. We live in a culture that glorifies invulnerability. We are told to toughen up, to keep our emotions in check, to never let anyone see us struggle. We celebrate independence to the point that asking for help feels like failure. We measure strength by how much we can carry alone rather than by how willing we are to lean on others. But what if we have it all wrong? What if real strength is not in the walls we build, but in our willingness to tear them down? What if true courage is not in pretending we have it all together, but in admitting when we don't? The irony of vulnerability is that it is the very thing we crave in others, yet fear in ourselves. We admire people who are honest, who speak their truth, who allow themselves to be fully seen. But when it comes to our own lives, we hesitate. We tell ourselves that if people knew the real us, the messy us, the struggling us, the uncertain us, they would turn away. We convince ourselves that we must earn love by being perfect, by being easy to be around, by never asking for too much. And yet, the love we long for, the connection that heals, can only exist when we let ourselves be seen. Not as an image of who we think we should be, but as the raw, unfiltered version of who we actually are. Vulnerability is also the birthplace of every meaningful thing we want in life. A love cannot exist without it. Creativity cannot exist without it. Growth cannot exist without it. Every time you take a risk, every time you show up fully, every time you choose to be real rather than safe, you are stepping into the kind of power that cannot be taken from you. It is the power of being wholly and unapologetically yourself. This does not mean vulnerability is easy. It is one of the hardest things you will ever do. It requires the courage to let go of control, to risk rejection, to trust that even if you are not met with the response you hope for, you are still whole, still worthy. That the alternative, the constant guarding, the endless effort to appear unbothered, the loneliness of never letting anyone truly see you, is far more exhausting. You are not meant to go through life hiding. You are not meant to live behind armor. You are meant to be here, fully present, fully feeling, fully alive. And the only way to do that is to embrace the truth that your vulnerability is not something to be feared. It is the very thing that makes you powerful. There's a voice in your head that tells you otherwise. It whispers that you need to do more, be more, prove more. It keeps a running list of all the ways you are falling short. It tells you that you will be enough when you accomplish more, when you lose the weight, when you make more money, when you finally become the person you think you are supposed to be. But the truth is that finish line will always move. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you improve, that voice will find something else to chase. And if you are always waiting for the next thing to make you feel worthy, you will never stop running. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that your worth is something you have to earn. Maybe it was through praise when you achieved something, the way love felt conditional, the way success was celebrated while rest was shamed. Maybe it was through the expectations placed on you, the silent belief that if you just worked harder, if you just perfected yourself, then you would finally feel like enough. But no one tells you that chasing worth this way is like trying to hold water in your hands. No matter how tightly you grip, it slips through your fingers. Because worth isn't something outside of you. It isn't something you find, win, or prove. It is something that has been within you all along. You are enough, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Not because of your productivity, your achievements, or your ability to meet impossible expectations, but simply because you exist. This isn't something you have to fight for. It isn't something that can be taken away. It is your birthright. And yet we struggle to believe it. We measure ourselves against impossible standards. We compare our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. We tell ourselves stories about what it means to be worthy, stories shaped by a world that profits from our self-doubt. But what if for a moment you stop believing the lie that you have something to prove? What if you allowed yourself to exist without constantly trying to measure up? When you believe you are not enough, you live in a state of lack. You settle for relationships that don't nourish you, jobs that drain you, friendships where you shrink yourself. You stay quiet when you should speak, hold back when you should take up space. You second guess yourself, apologize for existing, try to be small so you don't become a burden. But you are not meant to live like that. You are not here to be a version of yourself that pleases others. You are here to be whole, exactly as you are. This doesn't mean you can't grow, that you shouldn't evolve, that you should never strive for more. Growth is beautiful, but it should come from a place of love, not from a place of I am not enough, until you can want to improve and still know that you're worthy right now. You can work toward your goals without believing that your value depends on them. You can want more for yourself while understanding that your worth is not up for negotiation. Learning to believe that you are enough is not about arrogance or complacency. It is about knowing that your worth is not conditional. It is about giving yourself permission to rest, to breathe, to exist without constantly justifying it. It is about trusting that you do not need to be more or do more to deserve love, belonging, and joy. You are not a problem to be fixed. You are not a project that needs constant improvement. You are a human being, already whole, already worthy, already enough.